Díomh, agus fáilte romh go léir. My name's Owen Feeney. I'm Ireland's Consul General to New South Wales, and delighted to welcome you this evening and this morning to this webinar on Twilight Together, Grá agus Solas, Ruth Medjber's incredible piece of work capturing Irish society during the pandemic lockdowns. I am joining you this evening from Sydney, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to welcome our partners this evening in this event, the Australian Centre for Photography and the Lansdowne Club here in Sydney, Ireland's premier business club in Sydney and New South Wales. Earlier this year, the Australian Centre for Photography hosted Ruth Medjber for an exhibition called Sense the Music. Her photography was displayed alongside that of Australian photographer Maclay Herriot. And we were meant to have Ruth over here for the launch of the exhibition, and unfortunately a small matter of a pandemic intervened. The good news and the silver lining for all of us was that in not being able to travel overseas, Ruth was able to take up a new project. And tonight we're going to get a sense of that silver lining and just what a wonderful project it was. It has really struck a nerve in Ireland in a positive way and really appealed to people on an emotional level as they come through the pandemic. It has captured something of Irish society at a really historic and challenging moment. The name of the project is Grá agus Solas, which in Irish means love and light, and I'm sure we're going to get plenty of that this evening. It started off on Instagram and then grew to the Irish Times and even to being featured and highlighted on CNN. We are very grateful to Ruth for getting up very early this morning. I understand Ruth is a bit of a night owl, given that her background is in photographing concerts and gigs. She's not used to being up so early, so thank you for getting up early for an Australian audience. The format this evening is that Ruth is going to talk us through this beautiful project, and then we're going to take some questions. Dr. Alison Holland, who's the curator at the Australian Centre for Photography, is going to pose some questions. I'll pose a few questions as well. And if you want to ask a question or throw up a comment, you can do it on the right-hand side of the screen on YouTube. And then we'll have Damien Ennis, who's a board member of the Lansdowne Club, offering a vote of thanks. So my advice is pour yourself whatever your tipple is and sit back and enjoy this presentation from Ruth on her work, Grá agus Solas. Over to you, Ruth.
Yay, thanks. Thank you, Owen. That was such a lovely introduction, and I am a night owl, you're right. So it's what, 7:30 in the morning here, so you'll have to excuse me while I kind of wake up. I'm used to touring around the world and kind of doing night shifts. But yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to everybody outside of Ireland down in Australia. So the thing about this project is that I know it did kind of reach a lot of people worldwide, and particularly Irish people abroad, because they felt like, you know, being away from family for so long, because I know so many of you won't have a chance to get home this year. So if I could kind of ease that, or else give you like a little bit of a snapshot of Ireland during this time, then it's my pleasure to. I guess I'll start by telling you who I am and how I got to where I am, but I'll try and keep it as interesting as possible. So 2019 was probably the most exciting year in my career as a music photographer. I had finished the year touring with Hozier. We did these amazing concerts in the Three Arena, and it was such a lovely big buzz. I toured Europe with them during the year. The year previous I had toured with Arcade Fire, and I had been a music photographer for so many years. I shot 14 electric picnics. I started working at it when I was a teenager. I really tried to cut my teeth as a music photographer. So how it started was, like I always say to people, I was a photographer before I was anything else, because my dad in the 90s in Ireland, in the 80s and 90s in Ireland, which I think you'll all remember was a bit of a tough place. There's now a recession going on. And my dad used to sell camera equipment. Like, he was a tradesman. He used to just have a van full of camera equipment and would deliver it to all these shops around Ireland. And when I was about 3 or 4, before I started school, we couldn't afford childcare like back then. So I used to just get lobbed in the van with all the gear and driven around Ireland. And so I had kind of an instant start with cameras. I'd be sitting there like with the old school like technology, looking at litmus paper, testing acidity of chemicals and playing with blower brushes and all this mad equipment. And I just developed such a graw for it. And yeah, I was taking pictures before I knew how to read or write my own name. Like, then it kind of progressed very dramatically when I was a teenager. And when I was a teenager, I was like a little goth mini rocker girl, mad into music. You know, like every other teenager, when you kind of get to that age, you start kind of discovering your own tastes and what you love. And I fell in love with music really, really hard. And I started working for this record company when I was 14. We'd put on these gigs called blast gigs, and they were underage gigs in the Temple Bar Music Centre every month. And I saw these photographers in the pit, even though they're only tiny little gigs, and I kind of went, oh, eureka, maybe I can put music and photography together as a job. And there was this photographer in there, and his name was Roger Woolman, and I said to him, I was just like, I was only 15. I said, I'm going to do what you do. And he kind of basically shot me down. He was just like, well, where's your effing camera then? And I was like, oh, you're right. Like, so I started bringing the camera with me at every show I went to. And I was full of confidence, like absolutely beaming out of me. I don't know where I got it, but I'd walk up to these bands and I'd be like, hi, I'm Ruth. I'm your photographer now. And since then, it was something that I set my mind to. I was like, I'm going to be a music photographer. Fair enough, Ireland doesn't really have the economy to support a full-time music photographer. We don't. Our musicians make a pittance as it is, like, but I thought, I'm going to just figure out a way, I'm going to hustle a way to make this work. Did a BA in photography, which is a story for a whole other day because I'm not that academically minded, but sure, look. And then went to work for Hot Press. Hot Press, I learned more in 4 months in Hot Press than I did in 4 years doing a degree. From Hot Press went to NME, from NME went onwards, and I just kind of built myself up like that. But you know, it wasn't easy by all means. I was photographing anything and everything that came my way. My first job as a professional photographer was photographing. There was this magazine called In Dublin, and they were going online. They were building a directory online of businesses, and it was my first job was photographing chippers and pubs for In Dublin, and I photographed 200 of them one summer. And I didn't even drive back then, so could you imagine doing 200 locations on Dublin bus? And but it was a job. And it meant I had my camera in my hand, and it meant I could call myself a professional photographer. So that's the kind of story I had to get me to 2019. So like 2019, I shot my first Glastonbury, like, and I even have my little Glastonbury tattoo to commemorate it because I'd been there 10 years as a punter. I was there when I was 16, looking up at the stage going, oh my God, imagine being one of those photographers who's shooting in front of the most iconic stage in the world. And then 2019, the BBC called and they were like, we want you for the job. And I was just like, I was driving down, I think it was the M50, and I had to pull over and just go, ah! I lost my mind. I'd finally made it as a music photographer in 2019, like enough that I could call myself officially a music photographer. I was making all of my money from that stream. And then you know, the old Corona hit. The old Corona hit, and music, of course, was the first industry to be put on pause. And I say pause because it's not stopped. We're not dead yet. So around the start of March 6th, to be precise, because I was at a gig and I was getting all these notifications kind of going, here, we're thinking of cancelling this. We might be doing this. We're going to wait and see what happens. But this is, you know, within about 48 hours, I lost 2 years of work just straight away. It was all cut, absolutely all, like, unbelievably cut. And every, like, projects I had months and months and months down the line were gone, and with no sign of them coming back, except for one. There was one project that wasn't cut there was one email in my inbox that was like, we're still going to do this. And that was from Dr. Alison Holland from the Australian Centre of Photography. And we had lined up an exhibition to do in Australia in June. I was going to go Glastonbury and then I was going to go to Australia. And they were the only ones that didn't cancel. But I'll get to that in a minute. And I just have so much love for them. So anyway, everything kind of went tits up in the music industry. And the world was a horrible place back then, if you remember. I call it lockdown 1 because here in Dublin in Ireland, we are now in lockdown 2, where I know you guys are living a much freer life. You guys handled it maybe slightly better than we did over here. But we won't get political. But we're in lockdown 2, so all of our pubs and restaurants are closed, and obviously the music venues are still closed. They've never reopened since March, so we're going to be looking at a year without work for a lot of people in my industry. So they were very dark days in March, extremely dark days. I was gutted. I can't even explain how traumatized I was and how grief-stricken I was, because I felt it was very unfair. I was seeing all my friends kind of go to work, you know, whether they're working from home or whatever, but they're still working and they still have that part of their life, whereas for me, I didn't. My identity is very wrapped up in my job. We're one of the same. People know me as, that's Ruth the photographer. Do you know what I mean? They don't really know my surname, but they're just like, Ruth the photographer. That's just who I am. So I felt it a lot when the job was taken away from me. And I was bored. I was living on my own. I have a little tiny apartment in Finglas in North Dublin, and it was very, very lonely. And I know, you know, isolation is very isolating. So I sat there and I tried to scramble. I scrambled and I tried to find things to do, but I was always kind of led back to my camera. Like, I painted my room over and over. I'd cleaned the house. I'd installed wardrobes. I'd done all the bits that I'd been putting off to do for years. And then it always just came back to my camera. I started reaching out to Instagram going, I came up with this idea. It's like, give me a word a day and I'll go photograph it. And I did that for a while, but it didn't really didn't resonate, didn't quench my kind of desire to go and shoot, because there was no people in it. And I think that's the moment in my life when I realized I'm not really a photographer, but I'm just a people person with a camera. Like, all the camera does for me is brings me to people. I need them more than anything. And that's what comes through, I think, in my portraiture, and it comes through in this series. The series that you'll see it's wrapped around me here on the walls, because this is going to be an exhibition space. But everything that I do, I just photograph people, whether they're on stage, backstage, or sitting in their living rooms. It's all about the people, and that was the connection that I was missing. Then I was sitting there one evening, and I'd just taken the dog for a walk, and when it was getting dark, and I know I'm not alone when I say this. Do you know when you're walking by someone's house at nighttime and they have the big light on, or they have a Christmas tree in the window, or something's lit up inside? You're like that. Your eyes just go straight into the house and you're looking, because we're nosy. I'm nosy as hell. This project is born out of pure nosiness. And so this was no different. I was sitting there and I remembered this idea I had maybe like back in college. So we're talking like 2004, and I had this idea of photographing people at home at their windows, like framed by their window frame, and at twilight, so it was really lovely and dusky and warm and inviting. But I shelved the idea a long time ago because there was no relevance to it. It was literally just pure voyeurism, like just out and out nosiness. And I was like, okay, I can't really get away with that, can I? It's interesting, but there's no hook. And then I was sitting there watching all my neighbours turn on their big lights as the night came in, and I said, I remember that idea I had. Now it suddenly has relevance and cultural importance, and this is the one time ever in our lives that every single person is sitting at home, not just in Ireland, but around the world. The messaging was very clear: stay at home, Fána Bhaile, and you heard it over and over again. And I kind of thought, whoa, this is the time to do this project. So I texted my mates. I have my best mate Maeve, and in our little WhatsApp you see me go, and I scroll back. This was March 23rd, and I said, what time does your baby go to sleep at? And she's like, I don't know, about 7:30. So I was like, can you keep her up to Twilight? And two of us are Googling when's Twilight. And it's like, okay, sunset's 8:15. If you give her bottle late, will she stay up? Because and Maeve was just like, yeah, why? I was like, I'm coming out to take your photograph through your window. I want to do a test. And she was like, cool, whatever you need. So I drove out to their house on March 23rd. And this was a really heartbreaking night for me. I'd been alone for so long, not to harp on about it or anything, but it was fucking tough, like. But I drove out to their house, and their house is the kind of house that I'm just one of those annoying friends that just opens up the door, walks in, puts on the kettle, shouts upstairs, going, you having a cup of tea? And they're like, oh, Ruth's here. Like, I just insert myself into that house. So I think I've slept on their couch more times than I've slept in my bed, like, and I love it. It's like a home from home for me. So when I arrived up to their house that night to take this picture, I found myself reaching for the door and then going, I can't do that. And it was the first time that I realised our world has changed and I can't go into this house. And they were standing there going, crap, you can't come in. You can't come in. So we kind of cracked a window open and we were chatting through the window and we're like, this is weird, isn't it? It's like, yeah, this is so weird. And the baby's just like, what are you doing? So anyway, I took their photograph. I got them to set up a couple of lamps and turn on the big light. Everybody hates turning on the big light, by the way. That's the one thing I learned in this series. Everyone's like, the big light? No. I was like, yes, turning on the big light. And then cracked on with it, did the photograph, said goodbye, turned around, and I was almost close to tears going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to live this world where I can't go into this house and have a cup of tea. But we had to do it. So I got back in my car. Before I set off back to my house, my empty, lonely house, I looked at the camera and I went, oh, okay. The photograph that I'm seeing and the emotions that I'm feeling make this project relevant and worthwhile. And I thought to myself, okay, this is something I want to continue on. And I thought, well, there's not much point in me putting one photograph on Instagram. It doesn't have the same effect. We don't realise that everybody in Ireland is doing this. So I said, I'll do 16 of them, because in my head I was thinking, this is only going to be an Instagram post. This is how short-sighted I was. I was like, it's just going to be for Instagram. It's grand. No one's really going to see it. But I wanted a square picture for Insta. And in that square, I wanted 4x4. So I kind of wanted a tiled effect of how to deliver these photographs. So I said, I'll need to shoot 16 of them. So I went home, did my little list of who lives in this area that I can shoot 16 photographs of, all my neighbours, friends, that kind of stuff. And I did. For the next couple of weeks, off I went on my merry way. I took the dog with me. I'd stand outside someone's window, knocking and going, hey, yeah, ready, da-da-da, and did it. And my friends are so awesome and so nice that they're just like, yeah, cool, Ruth, do whatever you want to do. So did the 16, put it on Instagram and on Twitter. Next day, the Irish Times ran it as a front cover, which was just like, my mind was blown. And the next day after that, I had 400 emails in my inbox from people looking to be part of it, looking for me to visit their windows. And if they lived miles away, they were just looking to encourage me. So they were just like, listen, I live in West Cork. I know you're not around here. I just wanted to say your project was great and it touched me and you should keep going. Or like there was lovely nurses over in New York going, we're having, like, it's hellish here, but your project gives me a little slice of home right now and I'm grateful for it. And I kind of sat there and I read as many as I could and I went, oh my God, this is bigger than I ever imagined it would be. People really want this. So I started harvesting their postcodes, putting them into a weird spread I had, and then I said, I'm going to make sure I get as many of these done as possible because people want this and who am I to say no? And I started shooting and shooting and shooting. 2 weeks later, I had book publishers contact me, and one in particular was struck me. It was from Penguin, and this woman called Fiona, and she emailed me and she went, I saw your posts on Instagram because I've been following you for years because I'm an Arcade Fire fan. And she said, it was great for me being an Arcade Fire fan, seeing this random Irish girl on tour with them. And I think you're great and la la la. And I think there's a book in this, but it's more than photographs. I think you should write the stories. And I wrote back on, I can't write. And she was like, yes, you can. I've read your Instagram. You can write. So then once I had her on my side, I knew I needed to make this bigger than Dublin. I wanted to go all of Ireland with this book. And this was crucial for the next 3.5 months that I travelled. And when I say I travelled, I really travelled. It was heartbreaking because there was no hotels open at this point. There was nothing. Ireland was on severe lockdown. So I would get in my car, I'd drive 4.5 hours to Kerry or Cork or whatever. I'd arrive at like 10 p.m. I'd do their photographs. I'd hop back in the car at like 11 and then I'd drive back to Finglas. And I'd do that every single day for 3.5 months. Now, sometimes it was grand. Sometimes I was doing, neighbours up the road and I could do 2 or 3 houses in a night. But there was times where I drove to Cork to get one family. And the reason I did that, like you're like, well, why didn't you just make it easy? The reason I would go to Cork for one family was because it was a family that I felt was missing from the book, which is very, it was a conscious decision for me to represent everybody in Ireland in 2020, every type of person that we have here. So every race, ethnicity, culture, religion, even like every kind of personality type, every profession, every type of person, whether they live in a castle or a caravan, I wanted them in this book. Because I grew up with an African dad and an Irish mum, and he put me together, and I never saw myself or a version of myself represented in galleries or Irish media, definitely not in a positive way. And I just think every time I try and do something now with my work, I want it to be as inclusive as possible, so that if there is like other versions of people out there looking for themselves to be represented, then they'll find it in the book. And I think it's only fair as well, because Ireland in 2020 is this amazing place full of just like amazing people, and they often don't get a look in. So that was my plan. So that's the reason I travelled all of Ireland, not just in my own little bubble, which I would have been easier, but no, I chose the hard way. And then the pictures could only be taken at twilight, and sometimes you get 20 minutes of twilight a night, and that was another difficult thing where you were set up waiting for the light to fall. So the how to shoot a window at this time is that you have to wait for the light inside to equal the level of the light outside, so that there's no reflections between me and inside. So if you try and take a photograph of a window during the daylight, you just see yourself, right? But if you wait for the light to come through, you get this lovely mix of the gold, like the gold and the blue that you see. So this is all the twilight. So I worked every night for 3.5 months capturing twilight across Ireland, and then after the 3.5 months, I went straight into writing the 45 stories that you read in the book, and they're stories that tell all types of experiences of lockdown in Ireland. Okay, there's a lot of like, I had to be fair, I had to be true, and I had to acknowledge the grief and the sadness and the suffering and the sacrifices that people made to get us through this. So there is some stories where we talk about loss and death and the really bad things that have happened, because it's important, and it really makes this year what it was, and it's fair to acknowledge that. The book is like a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, much like this year, and it brings us to the lows, but then it also brings us back up again when I look at the crack that we had, like the niceness and the coziness and the fun that we had. And I've Niall or Nine, who hosted table quizzes that I lived for during lockdown, and then my friends Rocky and Zanya that would DJ through the night. Or there's even stories of like just people were so excited to see me coming up their driveway that they'd pop champagne, and they were all like half cut by the time I arrived at 10 o'clock. So it was that kind of buzzy excitedness that we were all miserable, but we were all still up for the crack and up for just having fun throughout it, and giving ourselves that little bit of hope. So that's the kind of journey that you'll be guided through in the book. And I released this book, I finished writing this book and putting it all together the same week that we had an exhibition with Maclay and Ali in the Australian Centre of Photography, which was it was absolutely overwhelmingly gorgeous for me to experience that. But I was very sad that I couldn't be there in person. I've never been to Australia and I was dying to go, and everything was sorted. I was my Airbnb picked, Ali helped me, it was going to be great crack, and I was doing little walks on Google Maps to find out where I'm going to go hang out. But sure, look, you know, things happen and they changed, but we pivoted, and we went from having one type of exhibition to having a totally different type of exhibition, all done over late night, early morning Zooms. And it was stuff like that that kind of really kept me going. It was Fiona's interest in the book that spurred me on, and then Ali's kind of like gung-ho resilience, kind of, no, we're still doing this, there's still ways around this. And it was that kind of spirit that really kind of gave me a good faith in what I'm doing personally as an artist, but also how we're going to get over this. And I'll probably stop talking now because that's bloody ages, isn't it? I think we're going back to Ali, are we, John? Yeah, thanks so much. So, hi, Ali.
Hi.
Hi.
Congratulations on the book. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I'm so glad that, your lockdown, produced such a fantastic outcome. And yeah, it was a great project. And if people want to learn more about Maclay and Ruth's evolving conversations about their practice, about the music industry, and then about how this exhibition was so important to them, you can go to the ACP website. I'm doing a plug for the ACP to Sense the Music, and you can read their dialogue. It's just absolutely captivating and great images as well. And one of the things that came up in your photography for the gallery space was that you wanted to take photos of, these fans at the barrier, sort of like bright-eyed and full of admiration for the idols up on stage. And we created this huge mural, so it was life-size, so that people would get this, this sense of the energy that was in the space, in the moment. And I just wondered if you could make a comment about how, the barrier in this case is like glass and brick, and, the stillness of the street is surrounding you. And so how did you kind of try and, respond or find the enthusiasm, I suppose, to engage with people who are that distanced from you?
Do you know, it was really hard to be kind of like self-motivated during a time when you're so like depleted and sad and just horrendously like just overwhelmed with loss, like. So it was difficult, but I kind of reached rock bottom before I started this, and I had this project was something I clung on to, and once I started it, I started to feel kind of a little bit of a buzz back from other people, and that's what kept me going. It was nothing to do with like, oh, the Irish Times has picked it up or whatever. It was feck all to do with that. It was to do with the people inside and how much they were getting from this. It's like my music photography, when I always turn the camera around to the crowd and you're suddenly reminded why you're all there, because they are loving it and they are in absolute ecstasy, just screaming up at people. Like, they're intensely enjoying this. And then I know that they'll really enjoy my photographs if I do a good job. And this was kind of similar in this Windows project where, yeah, I was out there and I was getting loads from this, but like they were getting loads as well, and they were feeding it back, which is why I called this whole space Gra agus Solace, love and light, because that's what they threw out the window at me. It was love, and it was physical light, but it was definitely a lot of love coming through those windows. So I'd start my day really tired and really sad and really just like, Jesus, isn't the world a miserable place? And then I'd bounce from window to window to window, and I was suddenly just kind of like just absolutely transported to a different mind frame where I was like, oh, these people are loving this. These people have been thinking about this all day. They've been out cleaning their windows. Some of them like would leave presents for me, which was the most touching thing I've ever known in my life, where they'd leave like little handwritten cards from the kids, or like if it was grown-ups in the house, they'd leave bottles of wine under a bush with like little notes and like hand sanitizer, and they'd be, you know, and some would even leave a corkscrew and a glass, and they'd be like, we want you to have a glass of wine with us. So I'd be standing there having a glass of wine through the window with these strangers essentially, but they were so considerate, and I knew that they'd been thinking about this all day, you know, writing the card, picking up a thank you card, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually giving these people something to look forward to every day. And it was just that kind of like the synchronicity between me and them, that I was thinking about it all day, that they were, and that I was giving them something to look forward to. And that gave me motivation to keep going and to keep the project going. And I don't know if those people, there's 499 people in this book, not including bumps, and there's 150 households. And I don't know if those people will ever understand what they did for me, you know, that it was because of them that I kept going. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, we have audio.
That's
there.
great, thanks.
I think Owen was saying something when we muted him. Sorry.
Thanks, Ruth. Wow, you are clearly not just a very talented photographer, you're also a great storyteller as well. And we were gutted when you didn't make it out to Sydney earlier in the year for your exhibition at the Australian Centre for Photography. The Consulate was really looking forward to it. But I can tell you I'm receiving messages now from people here in Sydney where you have a growing fan base. And I think there'll be a GoFundMe page to bring you out very soon, and we'll be lobbying the Australian government to get you in one way or the other, because the reaction from people here in Sydney has been phenomenal to your story and your presentation of the Grow Agus Solace project. I was really interested in the fact that you went to such lengths to try and capture contemporary Irish society. And as you said, there are 499 individuals in there. There are bumps. There's a horse. I think there are quite a few dogs, cats. Was there any element of society you didn't get, or somebody you really wanted to get and actually just couldn't get to between lockdowns and not being able to kind of move around the country? That's my question to you, Ruth. But I love the fact that you've captured all of these elements and strands of Irish society.
Thanks. And yeah, listen, I'm happy to head to Australia for the session whenever you'll have me. Like, bring me over. It's gonna be great crack. We'll just sit down and have the chats all the time. But yeah, do you know what? I kind of I had a list going into this of all the types of people that I could feature or that I wanted to feature, and when I kind of looked back at what I'd done organically through friends, there was a lot of people, like a lot of mixed race people. There was Muslim families in it, but they weren't obviously Muslim families. Like my dad is in it, but like it's just me dad. So I wanted to go and find a Muslim family to photograph on Eid, the night of the big celebration. So I reached out to someone I'd photographed 10 years previously. So she's here, and you know, it was that kind of, I made an effort to find people. And then there was people I'd never interacted with before, and I didn't have a friend connection, which was like someone from the traveling community. And I was like, oh, I don't actually think I have any contacts for anyone in the traveling community. So I went to an artist that I knew who did a project with someone before, and I was like, listen, do you have any contacts? And she was like, I have this amazing woman that you're going to love. She's a young female photographer. You're going to get on like a house on fire. So that I was like, grand, brilliant. And I went down and met her and took a picture of her and her lovely kids. And now I have a beautiful friend in the traveling community. So that's the kind of thing I loved about this, was that I if I didn't have the connection already, I do now. There is one person that has evaded my my advances, and because, you know, I have to do, you know, remember, and I had to keep telling myself this when I was shooting this project, that, you know, I'm shooting this at 11 o'clock at night. It's quite late. In the height of summer, it was 11 o'clock at night. And people are still terrified of this virus, and they don't want to be doing this. So I asked Michael D. Higgins to be part of it, but he said no, which was terrible. So I would have loved a little centerfold of the president and his dogs, but sure, look, maybe I'll get him for the next one. Like, that's it. Do we have any more questions? Cool. Yes.
You know, the use of Twilight, you explained, was for a technical reason to make the window disappear, but also creates this amazing aesthetic with the ambient light. And it creates this particular mood of lockdown. And I just wondered if you could talk about how the mood and the light reflects your own personal experience.
That is a great question. So yeah, it was a technical reason, you know, it was playing with physics and stuff, and I do kind of downplay it a bit by going, oh yeah, you know, reflections. I could have got over the reflections if I had added a polarizing filter and this, that, and the other, but I purposely chose to make it hard for myself by photographing a twilight, because it's such a beautiful time. It's such a nice time to photograph. You know, it's this it's a transitional period from day till night, and I felt like that's kind of what we were in as a society, as a world, was this weird kind of unnerving transition. Personally, like, that was always a really spooky time for me. I remember being at Glastonbury and stuff, and I'd always kind of be like really nervous getting to Twilight. I'm like, oh no, the crack is about to kick off. I don't know if I'm ready for this. So it was this weird time of day for me. And then from a visual, like an aesthetic point of view, it gives this really almost kind of romantic, nostalgic vibe to the photographs. You know, it makes the houses appear really warm and cozy and inviting. And that was essential to this book as a whole, that people were reading it knowing that, you know, these other people are in their homes kind of by choice, and by, you know, and that everyone is safe, and that we should kind of be grateful for the time that we have gotten to spend at home, that our home is our little haven almost, and that, like, yes, the world is a very scary, hostile place right now, and we're not fully aware of the dangers out there, so we're staying at home, but yeah, we should kind of acknowledge that it is this lovely cozy space that we have created. So it was intentional in a way that, you know, it kind of all came together, and Twilight just seemed like the most perfect time for everything I was trying to get across as a collective piece. Oh. Sure.
Ruth, thank you very much for that. Obviously, this was featured on the front page of the Irish Times, so people had a sense of what you were doing. But I'm just wondering, kind of, when you were standing out in people's front gardens, did neighbours kind of call the guards, call the police? Did they think that their neighbours had become famous and the paparazzi was out stalking kind of their neighbour? I'm wondering, or maybe kind of there was a local dog that didn't like the look of you. Kind of, were there any run-ins while you were standing? I'm sure it was also very wet at times, standing in people's front gardens in the middle of the night.
Yes is the answer to that. It was such a weird time, because you weren't allowed to visit houses, you know, back then. So all the neighbours were curtain twitching when I was in the driveway, and I was just like, how are you? And I would just kind of like shove it off and go like, it's fine, whatever, I know what I'm doing. But yeah, there was a lot of curtain twitching. Some neighbours were coming out to have a go at what we were doing. The dogs, I have a big, like, photographer's parka jacket, like total windproof. I dress like a bin man when I'm working, basically, and in all the little pockets there's different treats for different animals. Because when I was trying to do this, and I was trying to either get the attention of the dog or the cat, I'd have to like leave little treats on the windowsill, so they're like, oh, there's a person out there that I like. So I was definitely up for bribing all the pets in the project and to get me out of gardens safely. And then there was times when, do you know what, it was just absolute sincere crack. I went over to photograph this couple that I know, Connor and Lorraine, and Connor's a musician and Lorraine is a stylist, and both of their jobs were put on hold because of Corona. So they were feeling it really, really savagely, like I was, and they're friends of mine too. So I was just like, I really just want to see my mates. So I was like, here, do you want to get your portrait done on Saturday night? And they were like, yes. So I buzzed over to them, and I kind of asked them in advance. I was like, is there anyone else on your street that would want to do it? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe our next door neighbour. We'll put it in the WhatsApp group. And so I went over with the thinking that I was there to photograph them and their next door neighbour. And when I arrived in Chapel Izzard that night, it was carnage. Their whole street was out having the absolute crack. It was a big socially distanced street party. Everyone's out chatting, and everybody had signed up to do this window portrait. So I'd never done that amount of houses, but 10 houses wanted to be involved. And considering Twilight that night was only about 25 minutes, that's a lot of photographs to do in that short space of time. So I was like, I'm going to need help with this, lads. Let's just call a spade a spade. I need help. And the houses the windows on their street are quite high up. So I needed a chair to stand on. Plus, they hadn't been prepped about what to do. They hadn't been told to clean their windows. They hadn't been told to turn the lights on. So I was like, okay, I'm going to switch to production mode here. I'm going to go, Lorraine, you're going to go one step ahead of me. You're going to tell them to turn the lights on and open the windows. And I was like, and then Connor, you're going to bring a kitchen chair and I'm going to stand on that. And then there was like a bottle of window lean being thrown around to people going, here, you're next, grab the window lean. And they're doing their windows. So and everybody was half cut at this time as well. They'd been drinking for hours by the time I arrived. So you can just imagine this tiny little street of cottages going nuts. And I bounced from one to the other to the other. And at the end, it was like a big cheer and all the kids and the dogs on the street. And it was bananas. But it was that kind, I lived for that moment. Like, I kept that in my head for weeks after, going, that was insane crack. And it just kind of shows that people did come together and people did find happiness in the weirdest, randomest little moments. And people are they're genuinely kind of spirit, and they do, when it comes down to it, they're up for the crack. Like, and if I probably could have stayed and done all the streets in Chapel Lizard that night once word got out. It was that kind of like organic project that I'd be photographing them and then their neighbours, and they'd be like, actually, are you doing Lucan at any point? Because I've got loads of people in Lucan, and are you going from Lucan to Leixlip? And I was like, I could have shot this project for another 4 years easily. But it was all those little moments that you thought was going to be, I thought it might have been difficult to shoot this, and I thought maybe people were going to be annoyed at me standing in a stranger's garden. But no, when it turned out and people realised what I was doing, like the project grew so big after CNN and the Irish Times that I'd be standing in someone's window, particularly around where I live in Finglas and in Drumcondra. I'd be standing outside someone's window doing a photograph, and someone would be walking by, there's your one that does the pictures. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. There you go. So another question?
My last question is just to say, wow, what a fantastic project, from this idea that you had when you're walking down the street, peering into people's intimate lives to ending up with a book. But, it's just going to go down as this incredible visual documentation of a particular moment in contemporary history. And I just want to say congratulations. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Ali. That's so lovely. Thank you. And thanks for not cancelling on me, being the only person to not cancel during the pandemic. I really appreciate that. You gave me hope and you got me through it, and we did an amazing exhibition. So thank you. Cool.
In Ruth,
yes.
One question I wanted to ask you, maybe just before we get to them, is the lamps in the window. Were you inspired by Orson Uachtaráin? By you've mentioned President Michael D. Higgins and his residence, Orson Uachtaráin, where there's a light in the window for immigrants. And I wondered if that was an inspiration for you. But some of the questions we have coming in, one person has asked us, I think it was Richard Glover, has this project stimulated any other potential photography projects for you? Where are you going to next? Obviously, you're in music photography, and you're no doubt hoping that concerts return very soon to be photographed and festivals. And then the other question, and maybe you've answered it with the story of the Chapel Lizard cottages, was for you, what was the most touching photograph that you took? And a very important final question that people are asking is, how can they buy the book for families in Ireland, or maybe even to get it shipped out here to Australia, where we're all feeling a little bit homesick right now? But on behalf of the Consulate, a huge thank you, Ruth, for your time this morning and for sharing this beautiful project with us. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Owen. Thank you. I love, I think it was Mary Robinson that lit that light in the Oris for people finding their way home, and that always struck a chord with me. I love it. I love the idea of putting a light in the window so people can find their way home. And that was a big part of this project, and that's why I'm surrounded by lamps. This gallery space that I've created is lit only by lamplight, and it was that kind of signifier. And it we've loads of candles here, because I do, the old Irish thing. It's like, oh, you light a candle for me, and I'm a big believer in that. Like, I'm making wishes all over the place, lighting candles everywhere I go. So yeah, it is kind of all tied in together. And then in terms of Richard's question about has it started anything else, the project has helped me realize that I am a storyteller, and I think that my storytelling is just as kind of relevant, as important as the imagery, and I love pairing them together. I love a good a photo and captions. So I think it's given me the kind of confidence that I need to go on and do a second book, which will also be about Ireland, and it'll also be about people. I haven't quite worked out the kinks yet, and if the publisher's watching, they don't know any of this yet either. But yeah, it's definitely given me a little bit of a goal to work towards, and I know that this is achievable. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity to do it. But then I'll always say that I am a music photographer. Like, I am just a pure music photographer. I'd give anything to be back at a show, and to get that life back. Even though I am incredibly grateful for this experience that I've got, and that I've salvaged something of my year, I'm still very aware that there's so many people in the music industry, not just in Ireland but around the world, who are still out of a job and haven't worked since March. And like, that's crew members, that's lighting riggers, stage directors, stage managers, tour managers, lighting designers, that they're all out of work. Like, I've been fortunate enough that I can photograph other things, but they rely on an audience and a live sound, and that they rely on gigs. So for them, and like our bartenders, our pub owners, they're all still out of work. So I mean, if you could ask me if I could switch off Corona and go back to real life and get rid of this book, then I probably would. If not for me, then all of them. Like, so yeah, it's been a weird one. Like, I'm very grateful for everything that this book has taught me, but I obviously wish it didn't have to happen. But sure, look, we just have to roll with the punches, and I think that's what we're all kind of used to doing, is just rolling with it. And then there was another question, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was. Where'd you get the book? That's a good one, John, isn't it? He's telling me, where'd you get the book? There was someone else here that asked the question, how was I able to travel around the country under lockdown? I got a special dispensation letter to say that what I was doing was of cultural importance, much like it is to do broadcasts and stuff, that it's now written into the guidelines here that you're allowed to do certain amount of things for public consumption. So this book was seen as kind of documentary photography, much like, because I work for the Irish Times as well, so that's how I managed to do that. Then look at all the comments, these are all lovely, thank you so much. Then the book is available. You can pick it up wherever you buy books, to be honest, wherever your favourite is. I always say, like, buy from an independent bookstore, particularly a local one, because, wouldn't it be a sad old world if they were to go like Extravision? Do you know when you used to walk into Extravision and you'd smell the carpet and the plastic boxes, and it was a real kind of thing? And when you walk into a bookshop and you smell the books, and there's some, like, it'd be an awful shame if bookstores were to go. So buy your book wherever you love to buy books. And then all the heavy hitters have it as well. Eason's have it, and Dubray Books have it, and all that. But my store also has it too. So you can go to, I think I've got links there in the caption here. But yeah, you can buy it on my website and my store, and we're doing an Australian discount code for you guys, which I think will be sent to you after this if you've signed up for this and all the official channels and stuff. But yeah, I'll sign all the copies that leave my store, so I think there's only a few left, so you want to get in quick. But yeah, that's where you can buy it. But whether it's for Ireland to ship to someone here or to have for yourselves, yeah, that's that. So thank you guys. Thank you so much, I guess, for to Owen and to Ali and to Damien, who you'll meet in a second. And I really appreciate the just the crack, like, and the chance to talk to everyone. And I know it's not that it's 8 a.m. here, it's grand now, like, but you guys have stayed awake and I've interrupted your dinner and everything, so I hope you're having a glass of wine and you enjoy the rest of the evening. I'll be broadcasting from this space again every Friday in November. We're here having performances, and the reason I created this space was so that everybody kind of lost their stage, other artists, other photographers, musicians, poets and stuff, that they can come and broadcast from here and hopefully reach audiences. So tune in again to my channel if you want. But again, thank you guys so much for everyone watching, and just for allowing me to talk to you and ramble on for as long as I did. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. So we're going to hear from Damien. Cool.
There we go, live from Sydney. As someone who started their career as an architect, I know how much people value their privacy, almost as much as we enjoy sneaking a look in from time to time, like a good eavesdrop. So it struck me as it's an act of complete trust to pull off what you did when you did it. The eyes being the windows of the soul, I guess the windows are the eyes of a building and of people's homes. The word pivot probably gets overused these days, but to take an occasion such as this and turn it into something as beautiful as this is the very definition of the term. As you mentioned, it's a great Christmas gift for those of us overseas, or maybe starting to feel a little bit more homesick than we normally do. On behalf of the Lansdowne Club board and members, we pass on our genuine thanks to the Australian Centre for Photography, for Owen and Kate at the Irish Consulate in Sydney, and obviously finally to Ruth for managing to produce this amazing piece of work at an incredibly difficult time, and particularly for getting up early. Grow and solace to everyone who's watching.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Tell me when you're out. We all out. Thank you.